Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. For those of you that are already here, what we'll do is we'll hold on for a little bit just before we get started, just to give everyone a chance to grab their hot beverage of choice and join. And we'll get started very soon. Okay, I'm gonna get started. I think we'll have this recorded afterwards so we can send it out. But before I do, I really want to encourage you all to utilize the chat window and ask as many questions throughout the session. You don't need to wait until the end. And what we'll do, if we have time, we'll go through those and try and get you those answers. Any that we can't get to today, we'll follow up with you afterwards. So whether that's a question directed for myself, Emily, or Liam, we'll get something back to you. So keep using the chat functionality and we'll go from there. So today we're going to be talking about how to kickstart a data-driven culture with DINGs. I'm really excited to have Emily here with us today. And after that, we'll also have Liam McCarthy. He'll be doing a demo, which I'm really excited about. I'm not going to say any more. So that's kind of the events, and then we'll do some Q&A at the end. I haven't consciously given big introductions. Everyone else will introduce themselves. Feel free to engage with us on LinkedIn and to see what our backgrounds are. Always open for conversation. But let's get started. Defining data culture, it's definitely turned into a buzzword, and it's been mixed up with so many different things, and it's really lost its meaning. I recognise not everyone did Latin at school, and I've been bullied profusely for having to study Latin at school. But sometimes it is easiest to go back to the root of the meaning of a word, particularly when it's so misused or overused. And it's something that everyone's saying that they want. A company's culture, so something that every company has, it's created over time, and there are some parts that are consciously preserved, and there are other parts that will change and adapt, whether consciously or not. So a company culture isn't defined by how quickly your company adopts a tool or a service or a process. However, it will be an indicator of how the tool is adopted if there were no external forces at play. So let's do a quick exercise. Think of your previous company. And I don't know if people are starting to go back into their offices, but think about when you would walk into that office, what did it feel like? If you're looking around in terms of furniture, things like that, was it open plan? Was it the whole, founders and more senior members sitting in the same space as everyone else? Or did they have, the corner office with the windows, the expensive chairs, whilst interns got kind of cardboard boxes from the storeroom? What are those things that stuck out to you? You also have things like your employee handbook. So those will have, the different rules, the contracts, things like that. But then there are also the things that are aren't stipulated, but just happen. So those norms and values, those are the things that you recognize most when they've been violated. So an example of that would be, say your contracted hours are 9 to 5, but if someone was to leave at 5, there would be the kind of, half day is it kind of thing. Those are the things that aren't stipulated in your contract, obviously, but it's still a feeling that happens. And again, if someone's leaving, it feels like a violation. And that's one of those things that you need to be aware of. Also, really interestingly, since we've moved away from the offices, what are those unspoken rules that people still abide by? Unfortunately, burnout is a really real thing, and that is a symptom of the organizational culture. Again, if you're logging off before 5 o'clock, what's the perception to management or your teammates? All of those things will help you understand what you need to do and how you need to move any change forward that you're doing. To help crystallize what we're talking about, I always encourage clients and colleagues to call it a data-driven culture. Is there a solid data strategy in place? Is data held in high regard? Does everyone have access to the right data that they need to make business decisions? And of course, are those business decisions made off the back of using data critically in all levels of the business? And I say critically because it's not just a case of, this is the data, so this is what we're doing. It's a case of, actually, that's what the data says, but is there something else going on here that we're missing? So it's not closing a conversation with data, it's opening a conversation. How can we go about fostering that environment? Well, again, it's very much based on the organizational culture, but let's just talk about, here we go, one of the common misconceptions, and that is that a new data platform, new tools, those are the silver bullets, and that will help you create and foster a data-driven organization. Organizations cannot rely on technology alone to change human behavior. Don't get me wrong, it's a fantastic lever for cultural change, and it should be referenced throughout your data strategy. But if your people are not equipped to successfully embrace that technology and successfully embrace that change, then they can't adapt their ways of working. So you can't incorporate, those changes into new technology, never mind an organizational cultural change as well. So not only are you doing your people a disservice, you're doing your technology a disservice too. And, obviously the cost behind that as well. Just touching very briefly on data literacy and its importance, because we're really going to talk about the more change management concepts here. I encourage you to review some of the other presentations we've done around data literacy, data experiences, and also how you can use Looker to drive those. But it's one of those things that is important when you're rolling out this cultural change for a data-driven culture. Think of when you learned a new language. You started with the basics, certain words, phrases, those kind of textbooks that were relevant to the level that you were at. That's exactly what data literacy is. So, you weren't given an A-level, for those that are English, or a university level textbook on French when you were 6 years old. You were given the right information at the right time in a way that you could absorb and apply it. And, they always say if you're wanting to learn a language, the best way to learn that language is to completely immerse yourself in that culture. And that's exactly what you need to do at your organization. Simple terminology, exercises, all of those things to help building people up from where they are. But equally, you don't want to stagnate the people that do have that higher data literacy already. You will naturally always have pockets within an organization where data literacy is high, like your analysts, all that sort of thing. But again, it's ever evolving. So making sure that at least everyone is speaking some of the same language, that's a really good way to help drive that cultural change and to remove those anxieties when it comes to change as well. Moving straight into the sort of change management concepts, it's so easy to dive into the technology when you get something new and shiny, and also build what you think someone needs and hope they use it. There is so much technical debt that comes with this method, and due to the changes that you inevitably have to make once it goes out to users and they don't understand it or it doesn't fit into their workflow, that change management process hasn't happened. It's arguably far more straightforward to change the way a system functions than it is to change the way a human functions. But you can do things to make it easier on everyone. So if our goal is to make using data the easiest option for everyone when making business decisions, then we need to be very clear on what is valuable to our customers, so that we can serve that. It would be really easy of me to show you a timeline of sort of linear events, and how you should do X, Y, and Z to move people from state A to state B. But unfortunately, it isn't that simple. And again, in other presentations, I've spoken about the change curve and all those sort of things. So do take a quick look at that. But I wanted to highlight 4 main themes, and obviously in the interest of time, we can't go into too much detail, but I really want to give you a springboard into each of these for you to go and do your own research, find out what would work best for your organization, and try and kind of put some planning around these 4 work streams. What you'll find is that each of the work streams will inadvertently inform the other one. So these aren't sort of stakes in the ground, they're not silos, but they will evolve and they'll take on different shapes over time, which is absolutely fine. I'd be shocked if they didn't. But it's really good to have a template that you can refer back to, somewhere that you can make comments around what's working, what's not working, so that inevitably when you have to go through another change, you have that kind of historical log. It's also a really good idea to set timelines on things like that. And as I'll say at the end, you want to have tangible outcomes and metrics that you're tracking against, because like I say, it's not just as simple as building a model and ticking that off. It is changing people's behaviors. So let's talk about vision. Everyone has heard the kind of vision statements, things that people come out with. Some are brilliant, so I'd encourage you to look at, I think you can just Google best vision statements and things like Tesla and stuff come up. But clarity and change is incredibly important for a number of reasons, but one of them is to encourage the feeling of security. So there shouldn't be any underlying message in any vision statement, and it should be understood by everyone in the business. And I always tell clients to make sure that it holds them accountable as well. So don't have these kind of vision statements that go on for days and days and days. Short, sharp, to the point, and is something that you can lean on. Trust is a huge part in the emotional process of change. So leaning on your stakeholders and your change agents to shape this vision statement is going to be imperative. A surprisingly overlooked requirement for a vision statement is that it has to be understood by all levels of a business in every department. So working with your stakeholders and your change agents to try it out before you go live and get feedback on that. Stakeholders. So in large-scale rollouts, stakeholders are indispensable. Strong relationships are required, and not necessarily through you or other members of your team, but before the rollout, this needs to be mapped so that you can ensure open communication, you're getting a feel for what's already going on in their part of the organization, and you're baking that into your change plan. Bear in mind that stakeholders also need to be supported. So note their experiences, like I say, what their teams are going through, if they've had any rough experiences with technology change previously, noting all of that down and making sure that you're understanding their concerns. And again, it's building that trust. You will, of course, also need to leverage this information in your communication plan. So, and also your training strategy. So recognizing potentially, historically, we haven't rolled out training as effectively as we should do. Taking that recognition and making your training program or your onboarding program far stronger. So you can also segment this into teams, and there are so many different ways of doing stakeholder mapping. I'm a very visual person, so I like to have a radar. And then I'll always supplement this with a Google Sheet or a Excel spreadsheet if you so choose. But always understanding, who's engaged, when you engage them, who engaged them, the times, kind of where they sit in the business, and also mapping. I know people get funny about this, but what is their influence and what is their power and what's their interest in this change? The other thing to say up front is people will move into different parts of the radar, and they'll also drop off altogether and others will reappear. It is not an insult to no longer be a stakeholder in a change. You're going through a change and you need people to do things at different times. So, it's also great because you can say, we really need you to do this for 6 months or 3 months, whatever else. And then, so bear that in mind. Change agents as well. So, there are so many different terms for these people, and there's so much kind of psychology behind it. And again, if you have time and you're as interested as I am, do take a look at how you choose change agents. And they're not just the ones that are kind of, I wrote a blog post on it, it's like playing whack-a-mole. So the people that are really trying and really kind of see them popping up on everything, it's not just those people, it's also the ones that might be known as being quite negative, having them as a change agent as well. There will be nuances that you didn't anticipate and challenges that you just never expected to come up. And I promise you now, 9 times out of 10, it will be your change agents that you find that out from, not your stakeholders, not your other team members. It's someone on the ground, it's someone in the weeds, and it's someone that hears all of the gossip, and they've also felt some of those changes previously. Again, they'll need to be supported, but they are the people that will know the terminology that makes sense to their team. It helps with buy-in. If that person is well respected, or, so they were that slightly more difficult person, and they're taking part in the training, that's a really good visual even for everyone else. Again, you want to kind of have them, if possible, helping with formulating those training plans for their team. They understand the microclimates within your organizational culture. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is, prior to launch, having this network mapped out. Even if it's one person per department, just someone that can break down those silos, communicate to the team in a language that's understood, and also giving you feedback on who communications need to come from based on internal perceptions. So again, that ties us into the communication side. Massively oversimplifying here, but in my experience, this is one of, I feel like I've said this on every one, but the most overlooked and misunderstood work stream in a rollout. Having a rough outline of your communication plan will provide you with, anchors for your messaging. Particularly if at any point things get overwhelming. You're going to have a lot of things going on if you don't have an internal change manager or things like that. So again, even just a simple G sheet or any sheet mechanism of your choice will suffice. And just having the name of the owner of the contents, the person that's written it, the sender, the recipients, and the desired outcomes. And don't forget to always log what medium you used. So email is a really common one. And if you keep seeing email, you know that you're not sending communications in a way that elicit feedback. So that's something that you need to be very aware of. You have to maintain that people-first approach. So baking in messages from the ground, which is going to come from your change agents and your stakeholders. But again, it's something that you can rely on, you can tweak as you need to, but it's a very important facet of any rollout change. The majority of the comms in this kind of pre-rollout phase will be around building your network. So actually gaining change agents and building up that kind of, I guess you can call it the first adopters wave. So you'll be very grateful when you're starting to get a ton of feedback coming in, and say, for example, you get this kind of dip in productivity, which always happens in change. You'll be very grateful that you have that template for communication, that you've got to kind of re-inspire and motivate people. So come to the time here, but so many benefits of this people-first approach. Again, loads of resources on the Looker website and on YouTube of different videos of us talking about the product manager mindset. But I do have to be honest, the hardest part about getting that, cosseted data-driven culture is that there really is no true end state. There's no badge, there's no medal, it's not a box-ticking exercise that an organization can finally say, yes, we're data-driven. It's a cultural change, and it's the hardest thing to do in an organization because you're essentially tweaking the company's DNA. So rather than thinking of it as two different states, just consider initially to say, your end goal is to become a more data-driven culture, or just being more data-driven, rather than we are a data-driven culture. It's not as simple as just swapping the furniture. So, swapping the cardboard boxes for the interns with, a kitchen chair. But it's something that you have to do. There will be milestones, like I said previously, logging what those are, but you need to make sure that every individual is going through that change in the organization. And you also have to be very comfortable with the notion that this will always be a continuous journey. All cultures evolve, and what we aspire to be today as an organization may not be what we aspire to be tomorrow. So I know it's a hard pill to swallow, but it's always good to have that in the back of your mind. So now I'm going to do another quick reminder here, just to use the chat window, so we can address any of those questions that might come up. And I'm really excited to welcome Emily Kane from Ding, who's going to be our customer spotlight today. So hi Emily.
Hi guys, nice to see you all.
Awesome. Can you introduce yourself and your role, your background, and a bit of information on your company?
Sure. So I'm Emily. I've been working at Ding for about 8.5 years. 6 of those were actually in QA. Over half of that was as the manager there, and then 2.5 years in the data team. In between that, I had 2 babies, a boy and a girl who were 3.5 and 2. Working remotely has been great and a total challenge as well, like many people. So as a senior data manager, I manage the data engineering team, which consists of 5 data engineers and BI developers, including a Google Cloud expert as well. And I also manage the DBA team, which consists of 2 DBAs. As well as managing the team, I also project manage all of the marketing growth related data projects, anywhere from ensuring deep linking on our mobile apps is sending the correct data through to Google AdWords and Apps Flyer to our warehouse, to performance marketing and retargeting users through product catalogs and everything in between. So plenty of meetings. We also support our finance teams, our accounts receivable, our financial ops teams, commercial analysis, the leadership, anybody and everybody, the entire company basically. Within our warehouse, we run the financial calculations engine, do all the tax calculations, GM, GP, revenue. So we're really at the heart of the company and all of the strategy and data insights that our decisions are based upon. So the company itself has been in operation since 2006. It's I suppose basically what it does is we sell international top-up. We also sell domestic top-up as well. And that's usually for people who have emigrated to another country, usually from somewhere like Cuba to North America. And they would like to send home. It's a form of, I suppose, money remittance back to their family in Cuba. Or other corridors we have would be people who are from Pakistan or Nepal or India who moved to the UAE, or from South America into Europe. They're similar kind of approach. So it's cheaper to send top up and allow people to kind of call each other, and keep connected, particularly in this day and age as well, where it's much easier. I suppose our unique selling kind of point is that we have connected with so many mobile operators across the world, and they connect up using our API, and we have partners who sell our top up in retail stores, but also we've got our online presence with our website and our mobile app, and that's all developed and kind of evolved over the last 15 years. So that's
incredible.
Really, yes, it's busy. It's a busy place.
Yeah, and I'm sure you must have seen an uptick in customers, obviously, over the last year. I mean, ahead of talking about sort of scalability and things, what did your tech stack look like pre-Looker? Yeah, let's start there.
Okay, well, I actually have a little slide on that I can just kind of briefly show you. Can you see that okay? So that really, great. So that kind of is just a very high level view of how the data would get from our websites and apps through in our backend platforms into our our application databases. It would move then from those DBs into our kind of operational data store, which was just a place to kind of house these all of the data before our actual warehouse would track that data. We called it NED, which is New EasyTop Data Warehouse. Had to put personalize it as much as possible.
Of course.
And from there, how we disseminated that was through SQL Server reporting services and Power BI, using Excel and pivot tables on top of the Cube, which was OLAP Cube, which is how where we kind of aggregated all of that data. And then you can see there we have Great Plains, which is we connected with our financial company that would literally look after all of our invoicing and things like that. We also did have, you can see there we have GA360 and Firebase coming from the website and the apps, and that went straight into BigQuery. But they're not in any way connected up with our kind of financial and our transactional data. So understanding that revenue stream was really, really challenging for us.
Mm-hmm. And so in terms of what your stack looks like now, do you have any information? Can you share any information on that, and maybe even what those motivations were to start tweaking that?
Yeah, sure. So as I was saying there, we had all of these diverse ways of collecting data. We used GA360. We for our websites, we have a number of websites. We have our own ding.com website, but we also we look after partners as a white label as well, and we have a number of those. So we were always gathering GA events for that, but also we've got our mobile apps as well, which for Android and iOS. So we want to gather Firebase data there as well. We use AppsFlyer for our mobile apps as well. We used Power BI for our financial reporting, for some marketing reporting as well, and the same with our reporting services and SQL Server. So these were all, while they were all very powerful tools, none of them were connected up in any way. And we found that obviously was a major, major problem. Our NED system was a very reliable system, but what we thought to ourselves was, as the company was starting to grow more and more, we were finding that we were having more kind of competing stakeholders. So we would have finance teams on one side and marketing on the other, fraud, payments, operations, NOC, support, the tech team. We had so much going on that we couldn't continue, if we wanted to expand as a company, we would need our data to go with that. And it wasn't in the place that we wanted it to be. Now, at the same time as this was all being kind of understood, our tech team were moving to AWS. So we thought, right, this is a good opportunity for us to move to cloud as well. But we didn't want to move to AWS because it didn't suit the data that we had at the time. What we wanted to do was to move to Google Cloud, because we would then be able to leverage all of the machine learning capabilities from Google as much as we could. Also, the fact that we were using GA, Firebase, and so on, that obviously would then connect up with the BigQuery data warehouse very easily. And it has done, and it has proven to be a real success for us. On the flip side, then, we thought, look, will we continue with our front-end BI tools? But we decided not to do that, because we, as part of our migration to this Google Cloud platform, we're redesigning our data model. And if we wanted to use what we currently had, we would have to have two data models really in place. One for the warehouse and one for the BI tool. Whereas when we looked around at different tools and products to see what else was out there in the market, we saw that Looker was probably a perfect fit for us, because it is basically a semantic layer that sits on top of our data model. And so we would be able to connect up really easily to that. And so that's what I suppose that this slide really is about. You can see that where we are currently is we kind of have a hybrid of the two. So we're migrating everything over to our BigQuery data warehouse, and then just using Looker as our single source of truth, really, that has collected all of the data. And it also presents a really nice, it's very easy for the data engineer team to, I suppose, maintain that in a single place. And it's also a really nice interface for our users, our end users.
And I'm assuming this is all part of a much larger data strategy, because just hearing all of the different things that, is within your remit. How did that start? Who did you need to get involved? Like, can you talk more about that strategy piece?
Sure, yeah. So we knew what tools we wanted. We knew what I suppose the technical strategy was going to be, and that was through kind of an involvement from our data architect to our head of the analytics, or the chief analytics officer, to our data analytics manager, and then we obviously involved the technology team as well, which is a separate function altogether. But we work very closely, as you can imagine. I suppose we conducted a number of offsites, talking about our previous successes and failings, and, to kind of form a basis of some sort of rollout plan. Having Looker, while you mentioned earlier in your presentation that while you may have all the tools and everything in place, it's really no good to you unless you can bring people along with you. So we really needed to build a strategy that would market our new revamped data product, I suppose, to the rest of the company, both internal users and external users as well. So we had our offsites, we built out a plan, we had a series of workshops with our full data team to kind of, I suppose, market the revamp of the data team, the new BI tool, the advantages of using data in itself. We were already, I suppose, quite a mature company at the time. Really, not everybody in the company was seeing data as something they could use. It's kind of like that scary thing over in the corner that all those data analysts kind of look after, and they just feed over lovely dashboards and everything like that. We don't want to get involved in this kind of thing. Whereas we wanted to show people that, we don't, that kind of approach is a bit of a bottleneck. It's not really conducive to a company that's expanding at the rate that we're expanding. Mm-hmm. So really, we wanted to kind of get people thinking about a self-serving tool, which is what Looker is, and that's why we wanted to market it as much as we possibly could. We tried to show people how easy it is to use, like what the advantages of finding out the data themselves would be, and then what that would lead to. You know, we could get more into strategic planning. Like we're already doing that, obviously, but I'm more at a ground level, getting more into strategic planning. What are the best products that we can add to our platform from that level? You know, making us really, really successful. So actually, you mentioned as well, you know, having support from the Looker team to kind of get you moving. We actually found we had great interaction with our customer success team. We had some great presentations and gave us really great ideas on how to kind of roll this out to our teams. So we created a new Slack channel because that's what we use in our company to communicate. And in a way that kind of worked very well with the pandemic, because all of us then had to work from home. So we had we had all these plans about having these grand all hands meetings in the office, and we would, you know, be very interactive every couple of weeks talking about data and so on. But obviously that wasn't to be. And we had started this rollout, by the way, just as the pandemic was hitting. So we set up the new Ask Data Slack channel is what we called it. It's still in place. It's incredibly successful. We didn't actually realize just how successful it was going to be. We had a team intro video, you know, just everybody had a video. It was so funny. It was just a Zoom call that we all ended up kind of introducing ourselves, but it turned out to be a very amusing one. We gave daily updates on, you know, tips of the day, you know, things that how you can use Looker that's going to improve, just small little things, bite-sized chunks to get people more in tune with it. We had weekly tutorial videos, which have gone down very, very well, both not just about Looker, but also about, you know, how you can view data, like how you can gain some insights. What sort of insights should you be gaining as a team, and so on. And then my favorite was actually this Looker leaderboard that we would do. It was a challenge that we had set every Friday. We would give prizes to people who've used Looker the most during that week. And that actually ran for 3 months, and we had the ultimate prize at Christmas. Now, like, it might sound like a really frivolous, you know, silly thing to do, and it was completely silly. But it actually got a lot of engagement from the company, and we could actually see an increase. Like, we were monitoring this every week, the amount of usage, you know, who's creating looks, dashboards, and so on. And we could see that increasing every week. And whether it was just the challenge of it, or whether it was just a way to entice people, and then they saw the value of Looker, I don't know, but it worked. And since December, we've seen a massive uptick in usage across Looker, across the company. So we're really pleased with how that's worked out. But it's an ongoing process. You know, we're still doing it. We build shared dashboards in our shared folders. We still give team workshops and one-on-one sessions. Like, this is not something that just goes away after 3 months. You've got to keep at it, be relentless about it, you know. So, but it's funny what you mentioned there, the change agents. We call them Looker champions. Yeah. So we have them common, yeah, we have them on each team. And we do have we have the most cynical person as the champion, and actually that makes a massive difference, because they get really behind it and they really push it. But again, it's not easy to do that. It really takes a lot of your time and a lot of encouragement, and to keep at it and be relentless and dogged in your approach. But you know, we're seeing the rewards from it. You know, it's really fantastic.
It's amazing to hear all the things that you've put in place, because I guess my sort of, you know, the psychology side of it, you're doing so many different things to break down those barriers to entry. You're reducing that learning anxiety, and it says a lot actually about your organizational culture, that people are comfortable to ask questions in that open format in Slack, because you get some companies that don't. So they have to find a different method. But I mean, in terms of the relationships now that you have, it sounds like they've morphed over time.
They have, yeah. We've all of us on the data team have really gotten to know all of the other teams really intimately. You know, we're very knowledgeable about how the teams process data, really, what they do with it, how much they're not doing with it. You know, how we can encourage that. We're now fine tuning how we present data in Looker. You know, it's a really fantastic. It's made a massive difference to us, and I think Looker has been really the backbone of that. If you have a tool that you can get people behind, and one that's really easy to use, and that you can build your really simple explorers with the right data in it. Now, obviously, the data has to be correct, but still, it just makes it much easier, you know. And we've found that people have really taken to it. But I mean, when we think about I suppose the challenges of getting people to that, you know, people are, as I said already, people are afraid of data. They don't see it as something necessarily that they own, and it's been a challenge to us to kind of get them to think like that, you know, that they own the data and we're just the purveyors, we're just the people who help you access it, you know, and so on.
So, unfortunately, running low on time,
yeah.
But what's that one piece of advice that you would give to people that are just developing their analytics strategy now and building a data culture in support of that?
Yeah, well, I think there's 3 points that come as a package, really, as one. You know, we found that we need to describe the problems very clearly. You know, be really, really honest about what exactly are you trying to achieve? You know, what are we missing? What do we need to analyze? Get consensus on a solution as well. You know, talk to the stakeholders. You know, get their input into. It's really, really challenging to do that because, you know, a lot of stakeholders don't actually know what they want. So building prototypes and proof of concepts are difficult and challenging to do, but it's almost need to get something in front of the stakeholder so they can say yay or nay to it, and then you can build from there and be dogged, really dogged and relentless. Never give up, because you will get through it and you will find the right path. There's so many different ways to do it, but Looker has been the key to it for us.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, that's just been incredible. I can't imagine. I'm sure everyone's now very excited to get out there and try and, you know, recreate what you've done. So thank you. So now the kind of final piece, we're going to hand over to Liam, who's going to show us some Looker in action.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so we're coming up to 11 o'clock now. This is usually the time that I have my morning coffee. So I was actually looking at my bag here and it's almost empty. So I need to make a data-driven decision on where I get my next bag of coffee. And to do that, what I've done is I've loaded a coffee data set into Looker, and I'm going to start to explore that now, and I'm going to see where is my next bag of coffee going to come from. So the kind of entry point for data is often a dashboard. So here I've got an overview of my data set. I have how many coffees have I got. So I've got 1,400 coffees in this data set across 700 producers. And then what I also have here is I've got a number of points associated with each coffee. So these points have been are part of reviews as part of a coffee process. So that should give me an indication about how good quality are these coffees, and which ones should I start looking at for my next bag of coffee. We can see then the geographical spread of that of it across the world, and then, you know, where are those top countries by quality of coffee. But as is always the case, I guess, with this kind of pre-built analytics, it's not necessarily telling me all of the story of what I want to know from this data. So, for example, here we can see our top country by our cup score is Japan, which for anyone familiar with coffee might say that that's a little bit surprising. They're not exactly a country known for their coffee. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to dig in a little bit into this data to see and try and understand what's going on behind this, and what really are the countries that I'm interested in for my next bag of coffee. So I'm going to explore from here on this tile, and that's going to open up Looker's Explorer layer. And that's where I can now actually start to dig into this data in more detail. So what we have right now is we've got that visualization that we had before loaded up. We're just going to look at the data for the moment. So we're going to see for each of our countries, what's the number of points that was assigned to them. What I'm also going to bring is I'm going to bring in more data points from the data model that we've created in Looker here. So I'm going to look at what's the number of coffees behind each of these reviews, and that might give me more of an insight as to why certain countries are coming up here. And yeah, as I guessed, it's actually a single coffee in Japan which is driving it to the top of this leaderboard. So already by being able to self-service on this data, we're able to get new insights on it and start to understand things. So for our further analysis now, the next thing we might like to do is actually filter down here. Let's take a look at only countries which are creating more than, let's say, 5 coffees. So I'm going to add a filter based off of that, and I'm going to rerun my report. And now we're going to see Ethiopia is now coming to the top of this list, which is a little bit more as you would expect. So they've got 44 coffees, and they've got an average points of 8 across those coffees. So it sounds like Ethiopia is a good place to look forward to where I should source my next bag of coffee. But let's drill into it in more detail. Where in Ethiopia are we looking at? And what are the characteristics of the coffee that we would actually expect to get from that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter now on Ethiopia. And I'm going to remove my filter for the lower limit of the number of coffees I want produced. I really want the best of the best now that we've drilled into this region. And then I'm also now going to look at the region instead of the country. So across Ethiopia, what's the number of points we've got for each region? So we can see here that there's a bit of a spread across the different regions. Let's actually look at this as a table visualization or a bar chart here. So we've got this Gia Hambela, which has got 8.6 points, all the way down to these ones down at the bottom, kind of 7.5 points. So a bit of a spread across our different regions. It was definitely worth getting into this detail to make sure that we're getting the best of the best in terms of coffee. But of course, taste is not just a single data point. It's actually going to be across multiple data points. So, while we've got our overall cupper points, we can also start to look at things like acidity or aftertaste or sweetness. These are also data points that we have here in our data model, which can enrich the choice that we're going to make about our next bag of coffee. So now again, I hit run. That's going to send that new query down to our data set. This is no longer a good way to visualize this data now. It's a little bit busy. So I'm going to jump to a table visualization now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this column chart here. So I'm going to just take away that cell visualization. And under formatting, I'm going to enable conditional formatting, which is now going to give me like a heat map of the quality of the coffee across our different ways of measuring it. So what we can see is, characteristic sweetness across the different regions, which is really driving, I think, those high scores across the board for Ethiopia. And then what separates the really good ones from the ones lower in the list seems to be that acidity and that aftertaste. So the final piece then is, we've learned where our next coffee is coming from. We know what to expect from it in terms of flavor. But the last thing about dealing with data is it's not just enough to know these answers. We need to be able to take action off the back of it. And we want to be able to do that in as seamless and as integrated a way as possible. And that's where Looker Actions and can actually come in to integrate those processes into Looker. So each of these regions, we see we've got 3 dots after their name. And that actually has been linked up to a Google search. So I can just click on this region, and that's going to search for me Gia Hambela coffee, and now I can see, where I can actually pick up those bags of coffee from this region. So what we've been able to do is, start off from that high-level overview of our data set, understand the characteristics of the coffee across the globe. We've then been able to jump into that Explorer layer and explore that data model and explore those reviews, drilling into more detail, seeing it region by region and seeing the flavor characteristics of each of the coffees, and then finally jumping out into somewhere that we can take action and actually, make a purchase and order some of this coffee. So I'm looking forward to my 11 o'clock coffee. I hope you are too. And with that, I'll hand you back to Zara.
Thank you. That was awesome. I guess God, I don't know if anyone has coffee after 11 o'clock. Can they actually go to sleep at night? I don't know about anyone else, but I was certainly looking for the rating on my instant Nescafe, but it didn't pop up. So I don't know if Liam's missing some important data there, but there we go. So I'm going to move us into the Q&A portion. So please feel free to keep adding any questions that you might have for any of us, and we can try and address them. But we do have a few that have already come in. The first one is for Emily. And now I've just lost it. There we go. What other BI tools were you considering?
So we actually looked at quite a few of them, but we kind of narrowed it down to Tableau. We were using Power BI from Microsoft, and also the SAP Business Objects as well. So those three we narrowed it down to, as well as Looker. But with all of the others, we found that there was just, as I said, a number of problems that we would have had to encounter with those, whereas Looker was the kind of clear winner for us.
Awesome. And actually, Liam, so we've just had another question come in. What is the difference between Looker and Power BI?
Yeah, really good question. So I suppose what Looker is Looker is more of a data platform. So like Zara was saying, it gives you that semantic layer on top of your database, which allows you to have that data model. So you're telling Looker how to calculate those metrics across your business. And then every piece of analysis that you have is going to point back to that single metric. I guess, with Power BI, it's more of a workbook kind of a tool. It's kind of more of something you might do a single piece of analysis with. So if we go back to our example with our coffee, if you imagine we've got lots of dashboards across our business with those metrics of sweetness and acidity. With Looker, you've got a single source of truth for those metrics, which is defined within that semantic layer. And that makes it really, really scalable across your business and makes sure that everyone is looking at the exact same metric on every dashboard that they're looking at.
Awesome. Thank you, Liam. And just to kind of add to that as well, the importance of that governance and the semantic layer, it really comes into it. I mean, it's phenomenal anyway, but particularly when you're wanting this sort of self-serve, data-driven culture, the minute someone, provides a report that is actually inaccurate because, there was no governance or the metrics hadn't been defined across the whole organization, that's the minute they stop using data because they've lost trust, they feel like they've done everything right. Where you're wanting everyone to use data, you need to reduce any and mitigate any kind of situation like that, because like I say, you want to reduce anxiety, you want everyone to feel comfortable using data, and with Looker you have the ability to apply that governance to stop people getting into hot water. So actually, Liam, I'm going to come back to you. This is probably sort of tied into that. A question here: without a central BI team, who owns the teaching of Looker across the business?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think as well, Emily might probably have some good insights on that with how those kind of advocates or champions were used across the business. I suppose from Looker's perspective as well, we very much do try and enable that learning as much as possible. Every Looker implementation comes with end user training. The success of a Looker implementation relies on those business users going in there, and I think the kind of advocates and champions within the business really can help that too.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I think the initial phase is obviously that support that you get from Looker, supporting a small team to kind of build up the knowledge. And then from there, like that team, then whoever that might be, for us, it was our data team, roll it out to all of the different functions. And, usually it becomes quite clear who's going to become that agent of change or that kind of champion from our perspective. And then from there, it becomes a lot easier to get down to the root level and the root causes of issues regarding data and how you can fix those.
And Emily, just to kind of tag on to that, and also you mentioned when we were chatting earlier, this process of getting people to take on some of that training and getting everyone involved. What were the challenges that you encountered? Did you kind of encounter any challenges there?
I was expecting a lot of pushback and a lot of, I'm happy with, I don't want to change, I'm happy with what I have. And yes, there was a little bit of that. But actually, mainly it was time. It was people's times. Everyone's very busy. Everyone's got a lot to do. So it's finding the time to kind of train people up and bring them along. And that's why I say it's a case of being really relentless. Whatever that team might be that's charged with looking after this adoption, they need to be relentless in what they do. You might not be able to, it might take 6 months instead of the 3 months that you thought it was going to take. So it's just to be patient with that and to help people get through that. Really, I think the biggest challenge for us was the idea that people thought they knew what they wanted, but in fact they didn't. And that when you build something for them, then they realize once they see it, they say, this isn't exactly what I want. We need to change it. And you've got to accept that. And that's okay. It happens in every walk of life. So you have to accept it and you have to be adaptable and be ready to make that change as quickly as possible. So, that would be the main challenge for us.
I think that's such a good point. I mean, it's the, I don't know if someone's ever done it to you, but the 5 whys. You say what you want, and like, why? It's like, because I do, kind of thing. But going through almost having that, and I think we have resources on this as well, that product manager mindset of getting to the crux of what someone really wants. And I know all of the DCL, the support team at Looker are trained on this kind of the XY problem. And so I encourage everyone to kind of Google that as well. But such a good point. So we've got one more question here for me. So what would be your biggest piece of advice for driving a self-service data culture? Oh my gosh, that's a huge question. I think it's remembering that, again, taking away all the buzzwords, what you're changing is the culture that you have within your organization already. So with that, I've kind of given a blanket statement so then I can talk about lots of other things. But essentially, it's not going to be the case of, bringing in a tool or hiring a CDO or, all of these separate things that companies do to try and move things forward. When you really boil it down, it's changing the way people in your organization work as individuals, how they work together, and kind of moving forward. So, are you a company that when you hire, you're stipulating an understanding of data, or at least an interest in data and data literacy? If that's not something that you're doing now, it's something you need to do. Canning, again, it's all organizational culture, canning that kind of transparency piece that is in so many companies' vision statements and things like that. Make it, we want to be a data-driven culture. We want to be more data-focused. Again, organizational culture, if you don't have an open, communicative culture that, seems to be in place at Ding, that's something that you need to work on. You want to continue conversations rather than shut them down with data. You want to encourage people to, share what their struggles are or what they're trying to achieve. So I definitely took advantage of that question. But with that, we're going to wrap up. We're going to let you have whatever coffee you may choose, hopefully inspired by Liam's conversation. And Emily, thank you again so much for taking the time to be here. It's been incredibly informative, and I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. It's good to be here.
Thank you.